Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Thank you so much, Monica, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast and share your Zoey with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I just want to start out by introducing Monica to all of you because Monica wrote to me a few weeks ago and she was fresh still in grief. And you are still quite fresh in your grief. But she wrote to me particularly because we are both physician bereaved moms. Now that is a very particular group of people, right? And believe it or not, there is a bereaved physician moms Facebook page that I think we're both on. Are you on that Facebook page too?
I am.
Yes. And it's so funny because you would think that, wow, that's got to be a small group, but it's actually a pretty big group, sad to say. But that's how some of us can sort of get to know each other a little bit through that. So we have that kind of unique in common. And we'll go into that a little bit later, because I think it does give a little bit of a different perspective than maybe some other moms might have. But for now, I really want you to talk about your sweet Zoey. She's such a little cutie.
Well, so Zoey was born on August 4th, 2016. And we decided to add on her middle name, Arya. I don't know if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, but sure. Arya was the biggest one in the whole compilation. She was fierce. Yeah. She was strong. She didn't let anyone get their way. She would always get her way, and she had a way of getting through it. So I said,
she's kind of small and mighty too, wasn't she? She's like this little thing, but wow, mighty. Mm-hmm.
You would never think at the end that she would have been the one to tie all the pieces together, but she was, and we did such a great job by using Arya as Zoey's middle name, because that's just exactly what she was. She was small, she was fierce, she was hard-headed, she was funny, she was cute, she was baby cute. My older daughter was pretty, but Zoey was cute. Zoey had the chunky cheeks, she had the 3 rolls on her thighs. She was beautiful as well. But whatever mommy or daddy told Zoey not to do, Zoey made it a point to go and do it.
Dear.
She made it a point. She, as a physician, I'm an endocrinologist, right? So I'm always trying to be careful with the sugar. Be careful with the sugar. I'm a type 1 diabetic, actually, since I was 7 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so we love sugar. So I'll never forget, a few weeks before she had passed, I was taking her to get her nails done in preparation for her birthday. And she said, "Mommy, I'm hungry." And I said, "Okay, baby, what would you like to eat?" She said, "I want sugar." She didn't even say cookies or I want some popcorn or some. No, she just got straight down to sugar. So
let's just be real here, Mom. I just want sugar. Any form, cake, cookies, ice cream, doesn't matter. Candy, we got it all. No big deal. Let's just go sugar.
Let's get straight to the point, Mom. I'm not going to beat around the bush. And I love that about her.
Yeah.
She must have been about 3 years old when my husband had told her that he was basically punishing her. And he said, "You cannot play on your tablet." And she said, "Tablet?" He said, "Yeah, that square thing." And she said, but Daddy, this isn't a square. This is a rectangle. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, wow, that was just brilliant.
Yeah, she's 3. We are in for it.
It's just the smarts of her to just say, well, Daddy, I guess I can play on this because this is a rectangle. It's not a square.
Right.
Let's call it what it is. So Zoey was very courageous. She didn't have many fears of anything.
Mm-hmm.
We actually took, here's a funny story. In 2020, just before the country pretty much closed down in March with COVID, we had already planned a trip from the previous year. We had planned all year long to go to Iceland. Oh. And my best friend, she's a medical examiner. She had actually gone several years prior, and she said she loved it so much that she was considering moving over there. But the only reason why she decided not to was because Iceland is a very safe country, very beautiful country, but it really doesn't have a high crime rate. So she said there's probably only 3 to 4 deaths per year, and it's mostly tourists falling off the cliffs.
So there's not a high demand for a medical examiner.
Not at all.
Right.
So when she told me that, and knowing how courageous Zoey was, and Zoey's told me before she wants to fly. Little did I know that she would be flying in her afterlife. But that was the first and the only time that I ever considered getting her one of those child leashes.
Right.
It was a beautiful butterfly, so she thought it was a nice little costume. But I remember in the scrapbook, I wrote, assuming that she would be alive many years later to show the scrapbook to her children. I wrote, I know, Zoey, please don't be mad at mommy, but I had to do it so you wouldn't try to fly off the cliff.
Yeah.
So she loved life and everything that life had to bring to her.
So did you make it to Iceland then?
We did make it to Iceland. We had just gotten there. My boss called me the night before and said, Monica, are you sure you want to go? I said, oh, we've been saving for a long time. We've been planning. So we went ahead and we went, but coming back, it was pretty eerie in those airports.
Yeah.
We had a ton of masks, a ton of alcohol, a ton of hand sanitizer, everything.
We were supposed to go to Greece for spring break in April, but we didn't because, everything all kind of happened in March. And so we just didn't. Everything was canceled. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I know. It was our first big spring break trip we ever had planned. And no, we haven't done anything. Last year we went to Tennessee. This year we're going to Arkansas.
Nice. Okay.
This is no more Greece. Maybe at some point in time we'll do something more extravagant. Now we go, I rent a house and we go. Yeah. We still go somewhere. So that's good. We didn't go anywhere the first year. I think we went to our cottage in 2020. Yeah, we went up to our cottage. And what was funny is then in the state of Michigan, they actually banned going to your second home if you were in Michigan. Isn't that bizarre? So we had a place up on the lake, and when we were up at the lake, they made a rule that you actually couldn't go between your homes. If you lived in Chicago, you could go to your vacation home in Michigan. But if you were in Michigan and you had a vacation home in Michigan, they said you couldn't go back and forth between the two. And I was like, well, we're already here. And we went out in the boat, which it was freezing cold. We went in the boat, and that right after that too, they made it illegal for a while to go in your own boat in the lake. It was these bizarre rules that made no sense whatsoever. Well, we're already in the boat. Now we're finally heading home. I hope we don't get picked up for going to our primary home, but those bizarre things.
I remember the boat thing because I thought to myself, how would that stop COVID?
I know, right? It's not going to stop COVID by not going in our boat, but whatever. I mean, it's all these things now, 2 years later, seem like that was just crazy. Why were that makes no sense whatsoever, but Oh, well, it's now I can laugh about it a little bit, right? At the time,
I know.
It was stressful, but I'm glad you got your Iceland trip in. You must have just snuck it in under the wire.
And I'm so thankful for it because it's kind of scary flying with it. And Zoe had never flown before.
Uh-huh.
So my older daughter, Angelina, she had, and she loved it, but Zoe never had. And since Zoe was very rambunctious and she would go and run off in the middle of a crowd and get lost and not care where mommy and daddy were. She was just that kind of person. And then add on a bunch of, regulations because of a pandemic. And it was a little nerve wracking.
Oh, I'm sure.
Looking back, I said to myself, I'm so glad that I had those beautiful memories with her.
Yes.
It was
I think
amazing.
back to, how you must look back at that trip and think of what a blessing that was.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get to that stage where I'm looking at her older pictures. Mm-hmm. I still can't do videos. Videos still, they tear me up and that's my kryptonite. I just fall when I see videos because it's her alive. And her voice, she had a very raspy, particular kind of voice. A lot of people would have asked about it, but that was Zoe. She was different. She was cute. And it's funny actually, because I'll never forget a conversation my husband and I were having probably a year or two before she passed. And we said, Zoe's going to be a handful when she grows up. And we were worrying more about, just the being more of a rebellious type. And after she passed, we both remembered that conversation. We looked at each other and we said, wow, we knew that we were going to have a hard time with her, but we didn't know it was going to be this hard.
Right.
So we look back on some of those things, and I don't know if I'm the only one that goes through it, but you kind of look back and see, is this something that maybe I sensed or something that perhaps they sensed that could have been coming? I probably like 2 or 3 weeks before Zoe passed, I just remember telling her one time, I was reprimanding her because she said, I don't love you, Mommy. I don't love you. I had just finished spanking her for something rambunctious that she probably shouldn't have been doing. And so I was telling her, you should love thy mother and thy father. Trying to just parenting, right?
Yeah.
And trying to calm trying to get my mom chill in. And I said to myself, okay, now you can't let your 4-year-old, she doesn't mean it. But I remember her saying, as I said to her one day, I may not be here and you need to make the right decisions. And she just looked at me and said, Mommy, we're all going to die someday.
Really?
She was 4, Marcy. What business does a 4-year-old have saying something that sounds like it would be coming from a 40-year-old, a 30-year-old?
Yeah.
4.
Yeah. That is like some of those little insights that you wonder.
Yeah. Yep. They know.
See, I'm going to take a minute here to ask you to not touch your earbud there because it's making a crackle sound every time you do. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just going to tell you that. So just so you can not do it again, but all right. Easy to take out.
Okay.
Yeah. You were talking also about how she was just learning to draw. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because you sent me this really cute picture of her with a magnadoodle.
She used to love to draw anything that she could possibly try. One of the first things she started trying to do was making traces of her hand. So when you look in my office, my whole office is surrounded by pictures from both of my girls, from Angelina and Zoe. And with Zoe, she loved making the round faces and then a round body and then the sticks for the arms and legs.
Sure.
So I have these graduated photos from when she was like 2 and then 3 and then 4. when the circles were getting a little bit smaller and the eyes started getting eyelashes.
Do you have one where the arms and legs coming straight from the head?
I bet I do.
I bet you do, because that's a developmental stage that they go through.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Where the arms and legs can come straight from the head. It's very, and because parents are always very alarmed by that. I'm like, oh no, that's totally normal. Because I study like child development, and you can see, I can usually tell how old a kid is based on what picture you show me. So you can kind of pick out their age, because they just developmentally just change us how they look at things. I love it. Yes. I love it. It's just such a fun, obviously, you can see I love pediatrics. I just love being around kids and as they grow up. So, and she just sounds like such a little spitfire, and I just love it.
That she definitely was. That's probably the best way to describe her. My husband used to call her wrecking ball. She would just go and run into everything, break whatever she could of her sisters, tear the Legos apart.
Yeah. So I think that you had told me that she actually passed away on her birthday. Is that right?
She did.
Yeah.
So
why don't you talk about that birthday first? Because I think I want to hear about kind of the more pleasant stuff first for the birthday, because she has turned 5.
She did turn 5. So the weekend before her birthday, we had gone to my parents' house, and the whole family came. And so that was her last birthday cake that we got to cut for her, and everybody brought their presents. But we said when she turns 5, which she was about to turn 5, we were going to take her on a big Disney trip.
Okay.
She already met the height requirements to get on Space Mountain and a lot of the other rides and whatnot. So we said, okay, she's ready. She loved roller coasters. She was fun. And so unfortunately, she never made it into Disney World.
Yeah.
We had it was August 3rd, and I had gotten off of work, and my husband said she's got a fever. Now, both of my girls,
I was going to say, I'm sure you thought, well, that's a bummer. She's got a fever. It's her birthday. That's too bad, right? Kind of wrecking her birthday with a fever.
Absolutely. It was a little worrisome for me, though, because she had a fever about 3 weeks prior.
Okay.
And her fevers always made me nervous because they seemed kind of like those absent seizures. They weren't really convulsive seizures where my other daughter had or I had. She would just stare off into space.
With fevers, right? Febrile seizures.
Yes. It, they only occurred with fevers.
Which we see that. So, people might not know about that, but this is not an uncommon thing for kids who get high fevers to get a seizure. And oftentimes it's usually when the temps are going up or when the temps are dropping. So it's when you're having those extremes, when it's going up really fast or down really fast, you can end up having a seizure. And it's very scary in general for parents. But once you have one, you are a little more prone to do that again. So, and it sounds like it's in your family, and right. And usually it's something that you end up growing out of. It just happens like in childhood.
Right. So seeing that I had grown out of mine, my oldest daughter had grown out of hers. Every time Zoe had one, I would just hold her, and my husband would watch just to make sure that she wasn't at any risk for choking on anything, for aspirating. So we had treated her with the Motrin, and she was hungry. She was very hungry. I remember when I got home from work on August 3rd, and she had a couple of granola bars and some chicken nuggets from McDonald's. Those were one of her favorites. And she was just really hungry. So I figured, okay, maybe she's trying to fight the bug or whatnot. But I get more worried when they're sick and they're not eating or drinking.
Sure, absolutely.
So seeing her eating and drinking, I said, okay, we've got this. So we're not too far off from Orlando, actually. We're probably about 2.5 hours away. So we decided to drive up that night, and then the festivities would start on her actual birthday, August 4th, the next day. Well, as we're getting to the Disney resort and we're checking in, we're just kind of scoping around, and she comes with me to the bathroom. And so she's using the bathroom. We're all happy. We're all happy because she's learning how to use the restroom on her own, and she's no longer in any pull-ups or anything. So I give her a high five, Zoey. I remember I was very happy with her. And then as we're walking out, my husband and my older daughter are waiting outside for us. Zoey just walks right past him. Like she looks kind of like a zombie. And she had done that before on one of her febrile seizures. So I just kept my eye on her, and I noticed she was going to like a safe haven. She was going to an area where there was a chair up against the wall. So she could just like stand there. She didn't have to move anymore. And then she would just start gazing off.
Okay.
And so I told my husband, I said, she's having one. Let's go. Let's get her. So I picked her up. And as we were walking, she was already pretty big. She was a good 60, 65 pounds. So my husband went ahead and got her. And 3 weeks before, when she had a similar episode, we were outside in the pool, and my husband had put her over his shoulder to make sure that he would apply some force to the stomach to make sure if there was any food content, it would come out.
Okay.
And so 3 weeks before, when he had done that, I said, "Oh, that's a great job. That's great thinking," because she did in fact vomit, and we were able to catch it, and eventually she came to. But this time he tried it, and nothing came out. And then all of a sudden, he felt a big jolt on his chest, and that's when he stopped. And it was kind of late at night already. It was about 10:30 at night. And he just stopped and he asked me, he said, "Is she breathing?" And I tried to look for chest rise, and I couldn't see it. I couldn't see any chest rise. And so as we were trying to walk back to the hotel room, when we had stopped right there, the pool happened to be, the resort pool happened to be to the right of us. So my husband's first impression was, let's just quickly get in here. They had locked gates. All I remembered was my husband was able to get in, but I wasn't. I was kind of freaking out, but I wasn't, because I knew that we've been through something like this before, but I needed to get through these locked gates. So I just remember, from what I was able to remember, I just remembered crying out. Somebody, please help me. Please, please. This is my daughter. My daughter's in there. And so I was able to open the gate, and I see my husband just trying to clear contents from her mouth. And he said there was a lot of food impacted. So then we just started screaming out to the lifeguards for help. And it's such a big blur, but you know what it looks like when a code's about to begin. Just people start coming in from all directions. So all the lifeguards, and since she was by the pool, they had assumed that it could have possibly been a near drowning. But we told them, we said, no, we're just coming from here. She's having a seizure. And that was about it.
Yeah, but she wasn't breathing. And
they did the chest compressions, and just what seemed, it probably was all within 20 minutes before an ambulance got there, which to me felt like 7 hours. And I just remember them teaching us in medical school 2 minutes without oxygen to the brain, and we've already got some brain cells dying off. And I thought to myself, this is not good. This is not good.
Yeah.
And so they took her. It was still August 3rd. It wasn't just quite exactly her birthday.
Yeah.
But they did take her to the nearest emergency room, and they must have ran the code for about another 45 minutes. Probably about 30 minutes in, they were actually able to obtain normal sinus rhythm.
Really?
Which I thought was very interesting, but it was right after I had prayed to God and asked him, God, please, please give me a sign. Just please give me a sign.
Yeah.
Of course, the sign I wanted was for my daughter to be here with me on this side. Right. But little did I know, could that have been God telling me, she's okay. She's okay. Yeah. She's with me. Mm-hmm. And so she was then transferred over to the nearest pediatric, where they could just give her better pediatric ICU care. I'm sorry, I know I keep on pressing on this, but it keeps on popping out.
I think I'll have you take your bracelets off too, since we've got this little bit of a pause. Your bracelets? Yeah. Thanks.
So then they do transfer her over to the pediatric ICU, and they've got her maxed out on all of the pressors. Her blood pressure was still tanking. It was dropping. She's on the maximum settings on the ventilator. They've even got the EEG running, and it was her birthday. It had finally passed midnight. And I just remember the ICU doc asking me if I wanted to go on rounds. And I thought to myself, I don't want to do this, but I need to know.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget when they told me that there was no brain activity.
Yeah.
There was no brain activity. And I thought to myself, my little girl will not have a life if I try to keep her alive much longer.
Right. Right.
So they were able to get her blood pressure up a little bit, and then it dropped. And that just went on and dragged on for probably another 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
Until the ICU doctor looked at me and said, Mom, what do you want us to do? Oh, Marcy, it's the hardest decision I've ever had to make in my life.
Yeah.
But I had to call it. My little girl wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
My husband couldn't make the call. He left it in my hands. He made his peace with God and accepted it for what it was. But he was so torn. My husband's a stay-at-home father.
Yeah.
So he was just, the look in his eyes. They were so gone. Like his soul had just been taken from him. I said, all right, Monica, you've been dealt some pretty crappy cards in life, because type 1 diabetes at 7 years of age is not fun. Yeah. So with all that, you're here for a reason. You're here to make this call so your daughter doesn't have to suffer. So I made it. I made it.
Yeah. And I think about you being a doctor, and they treat us differently, don't they? I mean, they treated you differently than they would have. I imagine, I've been in pediatrics. I feel like you would not have said, Mom, do you want to come on rounds with us, in that same type of way that they did with you. And then it ends up putting so much pressure, because they feel like you should be the one to make the decision.
It does.
And yeah, I don't like the way people do that. I always feel like I always, whenever I talk to a physician family, I always make a point to talk to them exactly the same way that I do everybody else. And if they want me to change, that's okay. But I feel like it's better than to have these expectations that, well, you should know more and you should somehow make this decision. And because you're not a pediatric ICU doctor.
No.
Right? That's not what you do. And to put those type of things on you is a lot to do. I mean, I appreciate the reasoning behind it, but it's a lot to put on you.
Oh, it was, but I know if anyone was going to make that call, it was going to have to be me.
Yeah.
And as, like you said, as much of a spitfire as Zoey was, and as young as she was, I wouldn't put her through that, because I know her quality of life she could have been dependent on machines for the rest of her life. And I wouldn't be able to live to see that. And if there was a fighting chance, and I feel like we waited about a good 10, 11 hours from when she arrived in the ER to when they called the code. So I felt like I waited long enough and I put her through enough.
Yeah, you gave her every chance you could have. That's for sure. Yeah.
Because I was afraid and worried about the guilt, right? We know that guilt happens with, especially even worse so being a physician. What could I have done? What could I have, why did this have to happen? I should have known my pediatric advanced life support, which as an endocrinologist, I don't remember, but I thought about everything through and through, and everything that should have been done was done.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never known somebody or knew of someone who knew somebody that passed away on their birthday. So for me, it was like, wow, it was meant to be. She made a full circle.
Yeah. We talked earlier about that pressure that you put on yourself as a mom. I think all moms do that, is you feel like, well, it's my job to take care of my kids. It's my job to raise my kids and keep them safe and healthy. And when you're a doctor mom, you feel that doubly. I think there's no question, because you feel like, well, it's my job to keep my kids safe, but I have all of this extra training that I've done that I really can keep my kid safe and healthy. I can do it even better than other people. So when you can't, I think it's especially crushing for us. It's just how I feel. I just feel like it's doubly, because now I feel like, okay, I was kind of a crappy mom that I couldn't save my son or your daughter. And I guess I'm a crappy doctor because I couldn't save him either. And so it hits you from two totally different sides. I know we talked about that earlier. I want to just get your feedback on that.
And I did initially feel a lot of guilt and just, oh my goodness, how am I going to be able to care for people?
Yeah.
If I couldn't even care for my own daughter.
Yeah.
And
I know it doesn't make sense, right? Anyone listening to this is going to say, well, that doesn't make any sense, but it's how you end up feeling, even though it's totally irrational, right? There was nothing that you could have done. There was nothing that I could have done, but the irrational you just has those thoughts like, I should have been able, I should have. Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that I thought to myself when we drove home the following day, having to plan funeral services, is please tell me that this gets better. I was in such a state of shock, but I couldn't, it was so hard coming home to the way you left the house. Your kids' toothbrushes all over the place, their pajamas tossed over the tub, their dirty clothes in the laundry. Oh, mercy. It was just, you just hit a brick wall. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I need to see if I can reach out to other moms who have gone through something like this.
Yeah.
But even more so, I needed to find out how the doctor moms did it.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like my whole world, my family, my career, just everything I was waving bye to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
How could I
100%.
How am I going to get through something so traumatic? They say out of all deaths, the hardest one and the most traumatic one is the loss of a child. And we know this. So I just thought to myself, okay, you need to reach out, get the help that you need, get started, in the groups and get the word spread out. The word just happened to spread out much faster than I probably would have wanted it to. But looking back, I'm actually quite thankful, because a lot of the doctor moms here in our area, they put together a food train, and they would call and text every single day. And just, it was such an amazing support system that I never even thought or knew that I had.
Right.
But they were there, and I knew I needed to get that looked out for. My my probably new onset PTSD, but then also watch out for my other daughter and my husband, and how, I can't treat others until I'm okay.
Because again, as Dr. Mom, you feel like it's my responsibility really to care for them.
Yeah.
As a mom, and to look out and make sure, are they doing okay health-wise? Are there things that I'm missing, right? What should I be doing? And it's just this extra level of pressure.
Yes. And that extra level is pretty thick. The pressure is definitely pretty thick.
Yeah.
I felt even more guilt because we just kind of brushed off febrile seizures. I never knew a febrile seizure could potentially kill my child. We were always told, okay, as long as it happens with the fever, then that's fine. That's not going to be a problem. And
typically it's not, right? And what could you have done differently had you known differently? Nothing.
And it's funny because I always ask myself the same thing. What would you have done differently? And I don't know, would I have taken her to see a neurologist or a cardiologist to maybe perhaps, or would they have just said, okay, we're probably jumping the shark a little bit here, probably overusing resources, but you can't help but think, how could this have slipped? So I come to learn her autopsy came back as sudden unexplained death of childhood.
Okay.
And I had never heard that in any of my medical school training. I heard of SIDS. I knew of SIDS. We learned about SIDS and all the preventive things that we could do to try to avoid it. But I never heard of sudden unexplained death of childhood. And so what I've come to learn about it is that sudden unexplained death in a child that's between the ages of 1 and 18 years of age. And approximately 30% of children had febrile seizures, 30% of the children that passed. So I'm in touch with the organization. There's an organization and sudc.org. So they've got a research study going on, and they've been able to extract some of the DNA from Zoe's autopsy findings. They couldn't gather much from it initially, especially from any of the tissue sampling or any of the blood products, just because she was given so much blood products. But from the little that they were able to acquire, she was able to meet the requirements to get in that study. So hopefully they could do a little bit more research. And
yeah. I mean, I know not many people know of that. I certainly do. And I've certainly had different moms on whose children have died from that sudden unexplained death in childhood. But I do have to say, this is not something, though, as me, as a general pediatrician, is going to go and tell people that really exists. Because again, what could you do to prevent it? Nothing. I mean, maybe someday there will, maybe someday with this study that you're involved in, that Zoey was able to contribute to in her own way, will help us a little bit. But until that point, I don't want to tell an other already anxious mom, oh, by the way, your child could just die tomorrow. That's not a way that you want to live,
right?
Either. It's hard. It's why even the kids that die from the sudden unexplained death of epilepsy, which I've talked to several of those too, most of those parents have told me that if they had been given the chance to know that this could have happened, would they have wanted to know? And almost everyone has said, and in fact, I think all four have said, no, I wouldn't have wanted to know, because I would have lived a life differently, and I wouldn't I would have lived more in fear. And I don't want to live in fear. I want to live how we lived. But there's no good answer. There's no good answer.
There is absolutely no good answer. What if we could only have one more day, right?
Right.
If we could only have another 24 hours with them, another hour with them.
I know.
What would I say? What would I do?
Yeah.
I wholeheartely agree. At first I was thinking, no, I think I would want to know, because probably I would have gotten more, time with her and more chances to kiss her and say how much I loved her. Maybe I would have worked part-time.
Right.
So I could have spent more time with her. But at the end of the day, no, I wouldn't have wanted to know.
Yeah.
That doom.
I think in general, I've talked to my counselor. I've mentioned this on the show, how my counselor has said the mom always wants to know. Mom always needs to know why. Why did this happen? What exactly were those things like? And what, just needing to know all the answers. And it's so difficult when you can't and when you don't.
Right.
To have to just kind of go on and go, I really don't know why. And have to live with that acceptance of not knowing why or not knowing what happened.
Right.
I mean, it even is to me to an extent, not as much as it is with you, but my why is, obviously we're like in an exit lane going to a baseball game. The woman that hit us was going to the same baseball game. So how she was going 60 mile an hour and not 20 mile in the exit lane behind us, I have no idea. And that drives me crazy. That little bit of why and what the heck were you doing? And clearly you weren't paying attention. And what was going on? Were you arguing with someone? Were you this? Were you that? Me not knowing that answer will, eat at me. Not as much now as it used to, but it used to eat at me horribly. And that was just that answer to what were you doing? Not the answer of what in the world happened.
Yes.
And you've got the whole, what in the world happened?
Yes.
And you want, as a medical scientist, you feel like you really should know, and they should know, and you personally should be able to understand exactly what happened because of your training.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just such a challenge.
the whole thing is a challenge, but
The whole thing is a
you
challenge. There's just so much frustration, I think, for that.
Yes,
So,
there is.
so I'm going to change topics now to that topic of going back to work and working as a doctor again, and kind of how that was for you, how that's been for you. Cause we're still not that far in. You're still 7 months in. So what's happening along those lines for you?
Well, we had transitioned, or we're starting to transition out of telephone visits because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So when I went back, the whole from when Zoe passed to the funeral and me spending a little bit of time with my husband alone, with my husband and my daughter, it might have been about 2.5 weeks before I said, I need to try to get on my feet.
Mm-hmm.
I need to try to get on my feet. And boy, was it hard.
Yeah.
It was very, very hard. I had to do all televisits when I first started. And even that was a little bit difficult because I would just cry.
Yeah.
I would just cry. All the patients' appointments who got canceled and then rescheduled until I came back, they knew.
Yeah.
Many, I love my patients. I really do love a lot of my patients. And so when they found out, many of them cried with me.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them cried with me, and many of them even told me their stories.
Really?
And any children that they might have lost that, you would never pick up in a 20-minute, 30-minute encounter because you're busy talking about the condition and whatnot. So it was actually many of them helped.
Yeah.
Many of them helped quite a bit. And because I already felt comfortable and I connect with a lot of my patients as a type 1 diabetic, and I know all the tricks and whatnot. You can't fool me.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing in the background. I did it too. So we have a very strong bond, but I'm back to full time now. I'm probably about 98% in office now, and it's still a struggle.
Yeah.
It's like waves at the beach. One mom once told me. She said, you're going to have, you're going to feel okay. And eventually you're going to get more and more days where you feel okay, but then you're just going to have that one fell swoop and you're just going to lose it. And then you'll work your way back up and you'll be okay. And so I'm going through the waves right now.
Yeah. And she's right that those just come. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, most days I don't cry at work anymore. At the beginning, I cried between every single patient, but I don't usually, except 2 or 3 weeks ago, I cried every day. Every day at work, I cried. Something happened, something triggered me. I just cried. And that's okay. I think that's okay. I know it's okay because that it doesn't have to be like that the next day, right? Just because I did today, maybe I will tomorrow, maybe I won't. It gives you've got a little more hope, I think, going forward. And I think you had said you had some crying between every patient here recently, just some struggles with that too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking with a mom yesterday, actually, who's 25 years out. Oh my goodness. I couldn't see myself 25 days out.
Right.
25 months out.
Mm-hmm.
25 years. How will I make it 25 years? And she told me the same thing that many others have told me. one day at a time.
Yeah.
One day at a time. Just don't look ahead of that, because you never know what can happen. And boy, isn't that the truth after your little one being taken suddenly from you. I wasn't prepared for that, right? It wasn't cancer or anything. I had no
warning.
if I would have known before and had a warning, would I have been in Disney? No way. Oh, that's such a sob story.
Right.
But it's just one day at a time, and she's right. Every day is different. Every day is different.
Yeah. And I was going to say, even for me now, I still have a hard time thinking of 25 years out, because I'm 3.5, and you go 25. Yeah, I think I'll pass. Right. You start to think, I don't think I really want to live 25 years without Andy. We can just have a little bit of an earlier death. I think maybe 25 is a long time to go. Right. Because you can't let yourself think about that. Think about going that long without. So it is, I think she's right that you do one day at a time, 1 week at a time. You get to think, okay, I'm going to try to make it to next Wednesday. Because for a while, so Andy died on a Wednesday. So I was living Wednesday to Wednesday for a long time, because it's just like one more week. We're at 8 weeks. We're at 13 weeks. We're at 17 weeks. It was that time. And then it got to the point where I wasn't counting in weeks anymore. It was Andy died on August 15th. So it was every 15th, every month on the 15th, it counted one more month. And now it's spread out a little more. I don't get upset every single month on the 15th, but tell you that week that I had was horrible. It was the week of February 15th, which was the half year mark again. And every year I'm like a mess that week of February 15th for some reason. That 6-month point, it gets you, now I'm in the second half of that third year. I'm at 3.5 years now. So I don't know if that's what does it to me, or that it's February and it's dark and gloomy in Michigan, or what it does. But every year I've noticed that week in February, I'm kind of a mess. So it just you start to look at it in a little bit longer increments, but they still can get to you. Those triggers still can get to you and bother you for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if you've noticed that, some of those kind of things like that.
This week I was thinking to myself, because the kids are on spring break this week. So I thought to myself, this would have been when we would have been planning for a trip, even if it was to a local theme park or just somewhere, anything, family time. And I think that could potentially be what's triggering me, because I can't even think about like a real vacation.
Right.
What would a vacation be like without Zoey? It's not. And we love to travel. So those things are probably my biggest trigger right now. But then, it's odd, because I feel like you come to a point where you say, well, the glass is half full. What could have possibly benefited, not benefited, but I need to start looking in the more positive light. And I said, well, I don't have to celebrate a birthday and a death day and go through this awful.
I honestly thought that the very first time you wrote me. I thought, okay, well, the only upside to that is there's only one really sucky day. I've actually talked to one other mom that had that same thing, that they died on the birthday. So they only have one cruddy day. And that's just extra cruddy for sure. But at least it's just one day instead of multiple days. So good. See, you are looking on the bright side with that.
There's the other bright side.
Right. Well, there isn't always. There isn't always. And sometimes it's a pet peeve of mine when people want to put a bright side on things, but I think you can say that to yourself. It's different if you say it to yourself than when somebody else says it to you, I think. But the other thing that you said before we started recording, I want you to say what somebody recently told you at work.
Um, she, one of the farm reps who's deeply religious and meditates all the time and whatnot. She just always has this zen about her. She told me that Zoey is not your past, Zoey is your future. And she was referring to her making up a spot and making up a room in God's mansion and preparing it for us for when we all come home. And there was something about that saying, there's always, like you called it, a nugget. I love that word. It's a nugget that someone leaves with you. It's a mark. And it's just like, oh, it's so good. You got to jot it down, because you know, if you heard it and you recited it to yourself on that crappy day that you just can't seem to get up out of bed and want to move nonetheless, you just repeat that nugget and you say, okay,
It's always my future.
You know what?
I've
got this. She's my future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember the first time someone said something similar to me is that instead of thinking every day I live is a day further from Andy, because you can think that, right? Now it's been 3.5 years and his birthday's coming up again. And I can think every day is a day further from Andy, but every day for me is also a day closer to Andy. So when you start thinking about it that way, like, I'm not getting further from him. I mean, in some ways I am, but in other ways I'm getting closer to him. Of course, that brings me back to the 25-year thing that I'm really not a fan of. That every day's a year closer, but I'm still 25 years away. Okay, not so great. But every day is a day closer.
That it is. And that was the other nugget that I couldn't seem to remember, because this last nugget that the farm rep told me about Zoey being my future, I was like, oh, okay, this is great.
Yeah.
But then the previous one that I was trying to make my mantra, every day that you make is a one day closer to Zoey. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Every day you make it through, you're one day closer. You're one day
I
closer.
thought to myself, how can you possibly celebrate another birthday? She's not here. She's, it's those happy days. They're not going to be. And then someone flipped it and said, well, look at it this way. Every year that you're getting older is you getting closer and closer to her.
Right. Because we all have our day, right? We don't know when our day is. I don't know when my last day will be. I don't know at all. But what I do know is that every day I live gets me one closer to that day. And that day I'll be rejoined with Andy and whoever else, right? My mom for sure, but whoever else might pass before me. So it can be a joyous day. It's funny to think about it that way, because I do think of death in a different way than I did before. It's not as scary, like in this abstract sense, right? It's not like in the I really want to die, but in an abstract sense, like, well, that day will be a day of being able to be reconciled with him. Now, I don't want it to be too soon, because I'm not really ready to leave my husband and my other kids right now, but it can be a joyful. Yes. Right.
I used to be so afraid of death. And now all I can think of is, it's not so scary after all. Because you feel like half of you is there, because I still feel like the umbilical cord is still there.
Right.
What is that book? Oh my goodness. I must have gotten like 10 of them after Zoey passed. The Invisible String.
Oh, I didn't get that one.
I got a ton of those. I feel like the string is still connected.
Okay, I've got to look that one up now. My big one that I got is Lament for a Son. We got, I think, 8 copies of the book Lament for a Son. I mean, it's a great book, but it is really funny to get 8 copies of one book. Like, oh, another copy of Lament for a Son. We handed it out at a grief support group, and they really did appreciate it. So I think we have 2 left. So we gave away the other 6, but yeah. Mm-hmm. So the Invisible String. Okay. Got to keep that one in mind.
I believe that's what it was called, but it's just the string connected by your family and by love that never disintegrates. And so I feel like that string is still connected, that umbilical cord is still attached. I just can't physically
because that's
touch
by
it,
love.
see it,
That's
smell it.
love that connects you, right? And that can't
yeah.
die. That can't.
Yes, no, never.
Mhm.
So that's something that, half of me is still there with her, but
Mhm.
then I'm here. I have to look out for my other one. So I'm not ready to go yet, but if I had to, I probably wouldn't put up as much a fight.
That's a good way of putting it. That you wouldn't put up quite as much of a fight. You wouldn't be arguing with God saying, really? Now? Yeah.
There you go. Absolutely. Show me Zoe first, God. Oh, okay. Okay. Prove it to me.
Yeah. Oh. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your sweet, spunky Spitfire Zoey. I feel like we got to know her a little bit. So I do appreciate that. And I appreciate your little nuggets that you gave us, that you shared, that others have shared with you, because I really think that will be helpful to lots of people.
Marcy, and I appreciate everything you've done for us as a community. I'm still trying to find my purpose and what I can do to honor my little Zoey. And when I do, I'll let you know. But this is really, your program has helped so much.
Oh,
so much.
Thank you so much. But you know what I also appreciate is I appreciate you saying that you are still looking for something, because I get emails from people not infrequently saying, I don't know what to do. I haven't done anything. I haven't, people get foundations and organizations and do all of this stuff. You don't have to do any of that. You don't. You're right now, what you shared today, if that's what you do, that's enough. That's enough. You don't have to do anything big and huge and awesome. You offered those little bits of help. And right now, I think even being the doctor you can be, and some of those conversations that you've been able to have with some of your patients has been pretty amazing too. So sometimes they're just little things, just little ways that you have changed, that you can affect one or two people in a positive way. And if that's what you do, and if that's how you share, then that can be enough.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcy@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcy's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.